What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is Forgo, and I made a video a while back about Baiken, and she really is an amazing character. She's a very well-rounded character, good for PvP, and really awesome for PvE as well. But it seemed like her second skill was actually bugged whenever I was playing on my emulator. Now, today, I'm actually playing on my phone, and I can definitely tell you guys, on my phone, she's way better, way more consistent, way better. This is the set that we're going to be using for her. If I had the Guilty Gear set, that would actually be a lot better instead of this Tekken set. The Tekken set is really good. It is a good set. The beneficial thing about this set is when you do get the extra critical rate by 10%, that's nice. The critical damage by 50%, that's really nice. But the thing is, whenever you're doing critical hits on a 1 second cooldown, you obtain 3% power. And on top of the 30% PG gain that Bikin has, this is going to give her a huge power gain. Even when I'm doing my basic attacks, you can still land critical hits when you're doing your basic attacks. So you can actually increase your power gain very fast. And that actually is extremely beneficial. Now, her leadership is actually really good. But after testing that I've done, at least with the Tekken set, a set that has an insane amount of critical rate, critical damage for her, even with some critical damage Imprint stones, still with Ino's leadership, it was still better with her, right? If I just used Biken's leadership, I wasn't doing as well as what I could actually do with Ino. And that's whether I was using the Tekken set, whether I was using the Akane. I don't have the Guilty Gear set on my main account, so I really can't test that. But as far as Imprint stones, there's an abundance of Imprint stones that you can use. I actually used a different volume stone for this first stone in the very beginning. And it was this, let me see if I can find it really quick here. It's an SS stone. This one right here. Now this stone here actually does increase critical damage by 25%. And she's already got an increased critical damage by 25% on her second stone with the double attack. So I thought having the extra critical damage would actually be better, especially with the Tekken set, but actually no. Whenever I switched it and put back on this Guilty Gear stone that increases blast skill damage, I mean, Biken does have some blast skills. I mean, her first skill is a blast skill. Her second skill is a blast skill when you apply shock, right? And you're going to be applying shock most of the time. If you play her properly, you just want to apply the bleed once every 7 seconds or so, like every 7 seconds, because the bleed only lasts for 7 seconds. You want to be applying as much shock as possible. So actually having the blast stone is actually really good on her, because two of her skills are blast stones whenever you're going through your awaken rotation. Now, as far as like doing your default and doing your 3PG, those are strike skills. So a strike stone would actually be better in that regard, but most of the time you're actually using your skills instead of 3PGs and so on, especially when you're spamming. So it's really a matter of opinion on what's actually better. I did do some testing with the girl with some card sets. We'll talk about those Imprint stones in a little bit. But with the card sets, I did do some testing with her, and I did slap on a couple different option cards. I actually tried the Rugal option card here that increases strike skill damage on her, and it didn't really seem to be helping all that much. And I also tried the blast skill one here, and it seemed about the same. Honestly, I wasn't really noticing a whole lot of difference between using this option card or the Rugal option card on her. So I mean, with stones it definitely seemed to matter, but with the option card it doesn't, because you know there's an RNG factor with those option cards. I mean, if you click on this thing, right, you have a 50% chance to increase attack by 13% upon landing a strike skill, and it's on a 15-second cooldown. That's the thing. It's got a long cooldown on it, so it really didn't seem to help all that much. Now, the Gintama cooldown card is actually really amazing for her, especially like if you have the Guilty Gear set or if you have the Tekken set, because it actually can increase your critical rate. Now, this is not the best option card for her at all. The Guilty Gear characters have an amazing option card that's just lit, and unfortunately on my main account, I don't have one of those cards. Let me see if I can find it really quick here. This card right here. This card is godly, right? Because it increases your attack, increases your cooldown, but it also increases your critical rate by 7%. Just imagine, not to mention all the CP gain you gain from this card. This card would be absolutely insane on that character, especially with the Guilty Gear set. And that goes for all the characters using the Guilty Gear set. This card is just phenomenal because it has such synergy. I mean, you're going to have, you know, what, 14% extra critical rate, right? I think it's 14%, right? Let me look at here real quick here. I mean, yeah, this is 7% right here. So 7% from that other option card, that would be 14% increase to her critical rate. And if you had the Tekken set instead of the Guilty Gear set, then you can actually add 17% along with that option card. And her rotation, guys, the way that you actually want to play this character is you want to be applying as much. Well, before we get into the rotation, let's talk about the imprint stones. So as far as the imprint stones, I talked about this first stone. The second stone is actually really good, and the third stone is actually really good for her too. I actually like having the active skill damage because it doesn't matter if it's grab, and she does have a grab. It doesn't matter if it's strike. It doesn't matter if it's blast. It increases her damage as long as she's spamming her skills. Now, you definitely want to go with shock damage as far as her moon and star shaped stones. If you go with bleed, that's fine. But bleed isn't going to give her near as much damage as shock. And you'll see why here in a little bit when you take a look at her skills. But having the double attack here with shock damage is really going to be the way to go. I mean, if you get the gold ones, that'd be even better. If you had double attack, that would be absolutely insane. And the reason she does better with shock is because she gets a better buff whenever she applies shock damage, right? She gets 38% whenever you apply shock damage, right? 38% of attack. Whenever you apply bleed, you only get 30%. And honestly, whenever you're playing against Guild Raid, against Lunatic, you want to be applying as much shock as possible. So it's really a lot better just to have shock stones. And overall, just throughout the game, it'd really be better to have shock stones anyways, because you're going to get more of a buff using those stones. She does have a core effect with the bleed damage increase, but because you get more of a buff from the shock, it's actually better to go with the shock stones. I've actually tested this, and she's definitely better with it. And really having the Guilty Gear set or the Tekken set is going to be really godly for her. Maybe even the Mad Tea Party set if you have it leveled up enough, because when you have all that extra critical rate, you're going to have a higher chance of proccing this increased damage by 24% on a critical hit. I mean, it's just something that makes her super, super strong. Now let's talk about the rotation that you want to be using. So you want to start off with her second skill, because that's the skill that's going to apply shock to begin with, especially in Guild Raid. As soon as you apply shock, you can start breaking that meter against Nightmare Geese. And then after that, what you want to do is you want to hit the first skill. The first skill is going to be the one you want to use because it's actually going to reset your second skill, and you're going to get all these buffs here. This increased target damage received by 28% for 8 seconds. That is huge, and it's going to reset your second skill. But you always want to make sure that you have bleed every 7 seconds. You always want to have bleed while you're applying your shock, because you're going to do a lot more damage, because she gets increased to her bleed attack from her core. If you take a look at her core, she gets the increased active skill damage on bleeding targets by 80%. So that makes a huge difference, not to mention the buff from her shock damage. She's a really kind of a difficult character to play, but once you get her down, she's actually quite insane. So again, with the rotation, you start with the first skill, apply shock damage, just hit it one time. Start off with your second skill, apply shock damage, just hit it one time. Then go into your first skill, right? You'll get that increased target damage received, and then it's going to reset the second skill. Once it resets the second skill, you want to make sure that you apply bleed so you can get those benefits from her core effects and get that extra bleed attack damage increase from her core passive. So whenever you hit the second skill twice on the second rotation, then you want to hit the third skill. And this is the way that I've been getting the most damage out of this character. And this third skill is insane because it gives her a nice attack buff. It gives her additional damage equal to 220% of attack. And it also does quite a long hit. So when she throws out that thing, it just, whenever she brings it back, it does an insane amount of hits. And whenever you're trying to break the meter, that's exactly what you want to be doing with this character. Now, unfortunately, she has a short default. I mean, you will be using it, but it's really, really short. Now, as I said earlier, I definitely did a lot better using Ino's leadership than what I did with Baiken's leadership. And we are going to be using Dizzy as a striker. And the reason Dizzy's a really great striker is because she's got a heal. That is insanely good for someone like Baiken, because Baiken's shield is really good for PvP, but it's not worth a crap for PvE because it doesn't proc. You're not really going to have that shield. You'll get a decreased damage received, and that's really good, and that does help her tankiness whenever it's active. But when it isn't active, because she's an attacking type character, she will die very, very quickly. So if you have Dizzy, that's going to be very beneficial. I mean, if you have 98 Athenas, that's also going to be very beneficial. But she's going to get a 30% recovery heal. However, you won't get the decreased skill cooldown, and that's really, really important, so you can spam your skills a whole lot more often and then get this increased attack and that power charge rate. And by the way, the synergy with this power charge rate here and having the extra PG gain from the Tekken set is actually quite insane for Bikin, along with the 30% PG gain. So I've already pre-recorded some runs for you guys. I actually spent a couple hours trying to do this so I could try to get the best run possible. But here we go. We got a couple Broly's up on the screen showing some love. Ooh. And you start with the shock, and then you want to hit it twice the second time. You see I got the bleed applied. So you do a little bit more damage. Now we're just trying to dodge and trying to avoid old Pecker Munch, right? We're going to use our default. And, you know, with the build that I have, her default can break the meter when it's about, as long as you got bleed and shock applied at the same time, when it's about, you know, maybe a quarter of the way, maybe a little bit less as far as the meter is concerned. And the thing is, you're going to notice, the thing that sucks about Baiken is that you got to use multiple skills and they take a little bit of time. They're not as fast. You can't cancel them as fast as other characters. And that does kind of hinder a little bit. Now you notice I'm not using my hyper armor. I'm not using my skills. I'm just using my basic attacks because I want to have my hyper armor ready. You saw what I just did there. Right before Geese right before he went ready to go into his Raging Storm, I hit this second skill first, apply shock. First skill to apply the increased target damage received. Second skill, I hit it twice again to apply bleed, and then I hit the third skill, and then I went into the 3PG. And that's what I try to do every single time with this character, and just guard whenever the darkness is applied. Because if I try doing my basic attacks right now, I'm just gonna die, right? And see, you notice I'll do the same thing before I do the 3PG every time. I always try to apply shock first, apply the increased target damage received from the first skill, go back into the hyper armor, hit it twice to apply a little bleed, and then hit the third skill, and then go into a 3PG. And as you guys can see, you can actually break the meter quite well doing that. And by the way, if you don't have a Tekken set, if you don't have a Guilty Gear set, with the Akane set, I could do just about as much damage as I could with the Tekken set. But I wanted to try to kind of replicate the Guilty Gear set, but in all honesty, the Guilty Gear set's just way better. Best set, increased critical damage by 70% versus 50% on this set right here. You get a little more critical rate with the Tekken set, but the Guilty Gear set will smoke the Tekken set, guys. It will. It'll absolutely destroy it as far as your damage is concerned. The only real benefit to the Tekken set versus the Guilty Gear set is the fact that you can obtain a lot more PG, because every time you land critical hits, you're going to gain 3% PG gain. So that's the only thing that really makes a big difference. But in all reality, if you had the Guilty Gear set, you'd be doing so much damage, it really wouldn't matter. You wouldn't need that extra PG gain. And here we're guarding again. We're waiting for Geese to finish his iframe. And another thing, by the way, something that I noticed is before you use Baiken's second skill to apply shock, whenever Geese goes into his iframe, he'll bring his arms down. And right when he rears his arm back, right when he gets ready to go into his skills, he'll bring his arm back. Then you want to go into your skills. Then you want to apply the shock, and then the first skill, and then the third skill, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, she's getting it done, guys. She's doing really, really well. Not too shabby at all. So I just I wanted to make this video to really kind of make up for the first video I did about Bikin, because I tried this on my emulator, and man, her second skill on my emulator is just buggy. A lot of times it doesn't apply the shock, even though I might just hold the second skill. I just hold it down, or I just tap it one time, and it still will apply bleed. But with my phone, it's way more consistent. She's doing amazing right now, putting up some amazing scores. You need 714 million to do one key, and she's absolutely, I mean, she's already shattered that, right? She's already shattered one key like it's absolutely nothing. And I'm telling you, if I had that Guilty Gear set, this score would be way, way better. And oh yeah, get it done, girl, get it done. Now you always gotta be careful. You want to guard right after you do your default there, so you don't die. And we're gonna go ahead and pause it here. We're gonna go ahead and pause it, guys. Right? We have 898, about 900 million that she did. That is a very, very good score. Really proud of Bikin. She did amazing. But honestly, having that heal from Dizzy really does make a difference. I mean, you could use Dizzy. You could use other healers as well if you want to try them. You won't get the decreased skill cooldown. You might not get the increased attack. But you still could use Bikin. As long as she's got a good heal, you're going to be pretty much good to go. And as long as she's well built. So I just wanted to represent Bikin a little bit. Wanted to show that she's actually very, very powerful. And there's a reason why I have her second on the tier list. Another thing about Bikin that I just want to point out really quick that I didn't really touch on in the tier list is that, you know, Bikin really is the only character that does have a counter to fear, right? Which is pretty damn cool, guys. I mean, you know, she gains 10% power when attacked while in fear, so she's actually gaining power, but then she applies fear to the attacker for 2 seconds. So whenever fear is applied to her, she can actually apply fear to them. So it is a counter, which is pretty damn awesome. That's actually pretty freaking cool that she does have it. But Baiken does require some careful gameplay. You really got to apply the right skills at the right times to get the optimal damage out of the character. But once you figure it out, she is actually quite insane, man. I love her to death. And she's just a cool looking character. So let me know how y'all feeling about Bikin, getting it done. And I do stream on Twitch at 9 p.m. GMT+7 time. The link is in the description below. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Y'all take care and have a good one. See ya.